Anyone who works for, with, or around Donald Trump is inevitably going to get screwed over by him. And that is the lesson that JD Vance is learning right now, because the guy who only thinks about the 2028 Republican presidential primary just got railroaded by his boss. And we are going to get into it all. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video. And if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button, because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, before we get into how Donald Trump is using his failure to secure a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia to screw JD Vance, I want to start with the man who perfectly called him out for it last night, and that's Lawrence O'Donnell right here.
Before his meeting on Friday in Alaska with Vladimir Putin, which accomplished nothing other than distracting news media attention from Donald Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump said this.
I want to see a ceasefire rapidly. I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today.
There was no ceasefire on Friday, but Donald Trump still said that he was happy after his meeting with Vladimir Putin, which was widely declared a failure, even in some Trump-supporting media. And 72 hours after saying, I want to see a ceasefire rapidly. I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today. Donald Trump said this today.
I don't think you need a ceasefire. I like the concept of a ceasefire for one reason, because you'd stop killing people immediately, as opposed to in 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever it takes. But we can work a deal where we're working on a peace deal while they're fighting. They have to fight. I wish they could stop. I'd like them to stop. But strategically, that could be a disadvantage for one side or the other.
They have to fight. There's Donald Trump saying they have to fight. Donald Trump, who has given up even trying to get a ceasefire, after trying for less than a day to get a ceasefire, now says they have to fight. No, they don't. They were not fighting until Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, thereby winning Vladimir Putin the legal status of war criminal.
Donald Trump has no interest in peace, and Donald Trump has no interest in asserting any strength or leverage that he has as the president of the United States to defend our allies. When he's going after a media company, sure, he'll use his leverage. When he's going after a college, he'll make sure that he brings as much force down on them as possible. When he goes after a guy who, threw a sub sandwich, but bravely threw a sub sandwich at some of his goons, he'll send 30 troops. But when it's Putin carrying out a disgusting, disgraceful war in Ukraine, Donald Trump does nothing because he is pathetic. Just as pathetic as his vice president, who importantly said this about the war in Ukraine before Trump threw him under the bus.
Weapons. What we said to the Europeans is simply, first of all, this is in your neck of the woods. This is in your back door. You guys have got to step up and take a bigger role in this thing. And if you care so much about this conflict, you should be willing to play a more direct and a more substantial way in funding this war yourself. I think the president, and I certainly think that America, we're done with the funding of the Ukraine war business. We want to bring about a peaceful settlement to this thing. We want to stop the killing. But Americans, I think, are sick of continuing to send their money, their tax dollars to this particular conflict. But if the Europeans want to step up and actually buy the weapons from American producers, we're okay with that, but we're not going to fund it ourselves anymore.
What about Israel?
So JD Vance thinks it's Europe's problem. It's not Donald Trump, it's not Putin, it's the fault of Europe that we have not seen an end to this war. And if we want an end, then they got to step up. Apparently, babysitting Donald Trump during the summit with Zelensky yesterday wasn't enough for JD Vance. He really needs to see more out of those leaders because it is ultimately their responsibility. And Donald Trump agrees, right? Oh, he doesn't? Well, whose responsibility is it to end this war? Well, apparently to Trump, it's JD Vance. And one of the worst blows to JD Vance's political aspirations possible and I want to get into it all. Trump hands Vance Ukraine peace deal he can't win. Donald Trump has given Vice President JD Vance an expanded role in coordinating a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine in what could end up being a crucial litmus test ahead of his 2028 election. In the wake of a historic summit in Alaska and Washington, Trump announced that Vance would work with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the president's special envoy to help resolve the bloody conflict in Europe. The move is believed to be the first time Vance and Rubio, who are often touted as future Republican contenders for the White House, have been brought into such a major foreign policy challenge together. But some question whether it could end up being a poisoned chalice depending on success or failure, particularly as doubts remain over Putin's desire to stop the carnage. At least it's a better assignment than Biden gave Kamala Harris with immigration, said veteran political analyst Larry Sabato, referencing the former vice president's early role in trying to tackle the U.S. border crisis. Trump announced Vance's latest role in a Truth Social post on Monday night after the historic meeting with President Zelensky. But questions remain about Russia's willingness to negotiate an end to the war, given its foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, played down the prospect of a direct meeting on Tuesday. It is also unclear what role America and European countries will have in protecting Ukraine through security guarantees. Trump on Tuesday ruled out putting U.S. troops in Ukraine as part of any future peacekeeping mission, but the White House remains open to providing air support to Kyiv. The issue is likely to be a balancing act for Vance, who has previously opposed further U.S. military assistance to Ukraine. The vice president has been notably quiet since Monday's summit, and his office declined to comment when asked about his coordination efforts and what he hoped to achieve. Donald Trump either knows he can't solve this crisis, knows he can't end the war, or just doesn't care at this point and wants to focus on his next remodeling project, filling the White House with gaudy gold. But this is a disaster for JD Vance, because let's talk about the outcomes. Either one, Vance fails spectacularly, it blows up in his face, and it ultimately hurts him and his foreign policy bona fides as someone who literally just got into politics 3 years ago. JD Vance was not a two-term senator. He spent no time in the Senate, right? This is not an experienced political leader. Or, on the other hand, maybe Vance and Rubio craft some deal, but it is in direct opposition to Vance's very publicly espoused worldview that he wanted no regime change in Iran, that Vance wanted to lessen our involvement in Ukraine, and the opposite would have to happen for a deal to come to fruition. Zelensky obviously wants security guarantees because you can't trust Putin. It would be something Vance would have to cede, not cede, but do. I mean, cede in the sense that he doesn't want to. We should. Any other president would be happy to. But that's a massive, massive blow to this wing of the right that Vance is trying to cultivate around him as the MAGA future, right? It's just, there's no win for him. Donald Trump is throwing JD Vance under the bus. This is a lose, 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 lose. And that makes me really happy because I can't stand JD Vance and his fat face. I can't. And I'm tired of hearing about him. And this would be great. And it just comes at a time in which Vance has really not helped Donald Trump in any significant way. He hasn't really defended him that hard on Epstein. He hasn't come to his defense much on anything besides bleeding away, and it shows. Donald Trump is underwater, and Nicole Wallace broke it all down right here.
This afternoon, proof of an age-old principle that you can fool some of the people all of the time, and all of the people some of the time, but you cannot. You cannot fool all of the people all of the time. Donald Trump, take notes, because right now the American people are mad at you. Call it a reckoning if you want. Not just for Trump, but for those lawmakers who've hitched their wagons to the MAGA movement. Tomorrow will make it 7 months since Trump's second term began. I know it feels like 11 years. His report card, though, is so bad it's going to need a signature from a parent. Overall, according to Pew, his approval rating is in the dumps, with just 38% of all Americans on his side. That compares to 60% who disapprove of Donald Trump's performance as president. It's a near record low for him. On tariffs, which are the signature tool of his economic masterminding, he's 23 points underwater on tariffs. On foreign policy, amid the pomp and circumstance, amid a flurry of meetings with European leaders. Trump is 14 points underwater right now. And on his administration's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein controversy, largely ginned up by his own coalition and base of core supporters, Pew says just 25% of all Americans approve of how he's handling that. And it compares to 70% who do not approve of how Donald Trump is handling the Jeffrey Epstein files. Before you write any of that off as a small matter, go beyond the numbers. Look at what elected Republicans are hearing about the so-called Epstein files. This is from Wyoming. Wyoming is a state Donald Trump won by nearly 50 points a few months ago.
I don't know if that vote's going to come up on the floor, but what a lot of people don't realize is that is for the courts to decide.
So you're not going to give us an answer on the
it is for the courts to decide. Those files are sealed. It is for the courts to decide whether the files can be released.
And they're declining
it is a separation of powers issue. It is for the courts to decide.
Grand jury transcripts aren't going to get released, right?
I can't.
There seems to be a lot of sentiment in the House, on the right and the left, to see what's in those Jeffrey Epstein files. Do you support the release of those files?
I support. It's up to the courts to decide. It is up to the courts to decide.
Thank you.
It's up to the courts to decide. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
It's cute when MAGA is for judges after they're against them and then for them again. That was Congresswoman Harriet Hageman. She replaced Liz Cheney, being called a sycophant by her own constituents. Here's more from her town hall.
We have to have mail-in ballots. My question to you was, how do you feel personally of stripping Americans of those foundational tools of mail-in ballots?
Tools?
Mail-in ballots.
Mail-in ballots are not foundational tools.
So you just said we have to protect it, but it's not foundational.
You're fully capable of exercising your right to vote without a mail-in ballot. You are absolutely fully capable of exercising your right to vote without a ballot.
Again, Wyoming is a state Trump won by almost 50 points. It is hard to find a non-Republican person in Wyoming. And that's how her town hall went.
I don't really think that Donald Trump cares about his approval rating. I don't really think Donald Trump cares also about the future of JD Vance. I don't know what Donald Trump wants at this point. Do I think he wants to run for a third term? Yes. Do I think he will? I think he'll try. But his constant talk of heaven, as of recently, in the Nobel Prize and his legacy, all the donations to his library, which of course is just a way for corporations to write off their $1 million bribes to Donald Trump and him to funnel it into paying for his Qatari jet. It's aside the point. But it just seems like he's ready to go down with the ship. And that is the ultimate nail in the coffin for Vance. And I love it. And we're going to keep talking about it on this show every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you're stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.